Good evening. I'm Rebecca Lord, and this is a presentation about Junot Diaz and his short story Drown. This presentation offers the audience a brief look into the life of Junot Diaz, a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist from the Dominican Republic. Additionally, the presentation includes an excerpt and interpretation from his short story Drown, one of 10 stories in a collection of short stories from his book with the same title. Diaz's novels and short stories provide readers insight into the life of poor immigrants and the relationships between friends and family. Furthermore, Diaz's short stories in Drown depict a young man entering adolescence, developing sexuality, and the hardships experienced as an immigrant living in poverty. Junot Diaz was born in the Dominican Republic on New Year's Eve in 1968. When he was just 6 years old, he migrated with his family to Parlin, New Jersey. Although Parlin, New Jersey may have been a better place than Villawana, his city of birth, Parlin was a poor Latin and African American neighborhood. Diaz's inability to speak English was a major disadvantage for him in school. According to his biography in the Salem Press Biographical Encyclopedia, learning English was a struggle for Diaz. He was a bad student, exhibiting behavioral problems and failing many of his classes. Conversely, Diaz developed a love of literature, spending a good deal of time in public libraries. Although Diaz spent much of his time reading, he was also involved in physical activities such as fighting. An important aspect of Diaz's early life that carried with him into his writing was his father's influence regarding masculinity. Diaz graduated from high school, though not with optimum credits or grades, and ultimately made the decision to attend college, learning the importance of hard work from his parents. His mother, an assembly line worker and housekeeper, and his father, a former military policeman in the Dominican Republic, drove a forklift in New Jersey. Diaz worked 2 jobs to pay his way through college. Initially, Diaz attended King College and then transferred to Rutgers University, where he graduated in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in English. Continuing his education and focusing on creative writing, Diaz obtained his master's degree in fine arts from Cornell University. Prior to completing his master's degree, Diaz began writing some of the short stories for the collection Drown. Diaz graduated from Cornell in 1995, and Drown was published in 1996. The short story Drown was first published in the New Yorker magazine in 1996. According to the segment on Junot Diaz in the textbook, The Norton Anthology of World Literature, the title broadly suggests that the main character is drowning in poverty and his surroundings and in the culture to which his parents have brought him. Intriguingly, the short stories in this collection are described by Monica Hanna as gritty realism, lucid prose, striking immediacy, and electrifying language that includes both English and Spanish. Moreover, as stated in the Salem Press Biographical Encyclopedia, Diaz writes in spare, controlled prose that mingles poetic images and moments of lyricism with street slang, Spanish expressions, and a sense of pervasive brutality. Diaz is also well known for his novel, The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, and although this story is in part a history of immigration, poverty, and persecution, Monica Hanna stated that the 2007 novel marked a stylistic shift from Diaz's earlier work, embracing science fiction and fantasy and making extensive use of humor. Diaz returned to his former style for his next compilation, This Is How You Lose Her. In fact, the stories have the same narrator as the stories in Drown, only now the narrator is an adult. However, some issues of culture and family relationships are the same, but now that the narrator is an adult, new issues related to love and adultery are introduced. Diaz's new novel was a bestseller and a finalist for the National Book Award. Between the years of 1999 and 2008, Diaz was the winner of several literacy awards to include the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction. Remarkably, Diaz is one of only 2 Latino writers to win the Pulitzer Prize. In addition to being a famous author, Diaz has taught at Syracuse University and later joined the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he teaches creative writing and immigrant literature. Furthermore, Diaz is the founder of Voices of Our Nations Arts Foundation, which is an organization that helps writers of color, and he is heavily involved with his community as a member of the Dominican Youth Union in New York City, which provides an after-school program that prepares students of color for college. The chosen segment from Drown is as follows. Since his parents worked nights, we pretty much owned the place until 6 the next morning. We sat in front of his television in our towels, his hands bracing against my abdomen and thighs. "I'll stop if you want," he said, and I didn't respond. After I was done, he laid his head in my lap. I wasn't asleep or awake, but caught somewhere in between, rocked slowly back and forth the way surf holds junk against the shore, rolling it over and over. In 3 weeks he was leaving. "Nobody can touch me," he kept saying. We'd visited the school, and I'd seen how beautiful the campus was with all the students drifting from dorm to class. I thought of how in high school our teachers loved to crowd us in their lounge every time a space shuttle took off from Florida. One teacher, whose family had 2 grammar schools named after it, compared us to the shuttles. "A few of you are going to make it. Those are the orbiters. But the majority of you are just going to burn out, going nowhere." He dropped his hand onto his desk. I could already see myself losing altitude, fading. The earth spread out beneath me, hard and bright. This segment from Drown captures 2 very important topics from the short story: emerging sexuality, specifically homosexuality, and a time for decisions to be made after high school graduation for the future, whether to go to college or not, and whether to leave home or stay. The short story Drown is about 2 immigrant boys that are best friends growing up together in a poor neighborhood. One of the boys, Beto, is preparing to leave for college, while the other boy, the narrator, has another year left before graduation. The story tells of all the wild escapades the boys were involved in, such as stealing and sneaking into the pool at the local community center. In the beginning of the excerpt, the boys are at Beto's place after swimming at the pool watching porn, which happened to be one of their usual escapades. And Beto performs a sexual act on his best friend, the narrator of the story. According to the narrator, previously in the story, the sexual acts occurred on only 2 occasions. Understandably, the narrator is wrestling with the fact that he has strong sexual feelings for his friend and tries to convey to readers that the 2 acts were an anomaly and that he is trying to come to terms with losing his best friend, who will be leaving soon for college. Earlier in the story, when the first sexual encounter happened, the narrator was distraught and concerned that he would be considered a pato. And that would go against everything he had been taught by his father. In their culture, men were taught to be tough and masculine. After the second sexual encounter, the narrator seemed more relaxed and began to think about his best friend leaving for college, which led him to reminisce about their teacher, comparing them to space shuttles. His teacher said, "A few of you are going to make it. Those are the orbiters, but the majority of you are just going to burn out, going nowhere." The narrator considered his friend Beto an orbiter because he was going to college, and he saw himself going nowhere. Going so far as to think, "I could already see myself losing altitude, fading. The earth spread out beneath me, hard and bright." Ironically, after graduation, the narrator stayed in Parlin, New Jersey, living at home with his mother, selling drugs, occasionally shoplifting, on the verge of drowning in poverty. In closing, I would like to share an excerpt from the article Creating a Novel, Dominican Male Subjectivity, Genre and Narrative in Junot Diaz's Drown that best sums up the story and title. The threat of Beto's homosexuality to Junior's construction of Dominican masculinity is too much for him, and he would rather remain immobilized by poverty and addiction than depart from his concept of normative masculinity as shown to him by his brother and father.